practice. If you need a medical referral, we have the number up here. And we appreciate Father Thomas Crockleton Jr., Holy Trinity Catholic Church, for helping us today. Today in history, in 1977, Martin's Cove was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Quote for the day: the quieter you become, the more you can hear. The session status, budget week, committee of the whole, first day. Introduction, reading and reference of bills. Senate File 1, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 1, General Government Appropriations, sponsored by the Joint Appropriations Committee.
Pursuant to Joint Rule 14-2B, Senate File 1 is referred directly out to Committee of the Whole. Reports from standing committees.
March 5, 2021, Mr. Presidential Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 99, Unfair Employment Practices, Off-Site Lawful Activities. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. Senator Anderson, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. President, Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 111, School of Energy Resources Budget Submittal. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, and Wasserberger. No, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. Presidential Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 113, Business Ready Communities Amendments. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. No, Senator Beitman. Senator Anderson, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. Presidential Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate Joint Resolution 2, Convention of States 2. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Cooper, and Wasserberger. No, Senators Anderson and Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. Presidential Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate Joint Resolution 3, Federal Suspension and Orders on Oil and Gas Production. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, and Wasserberger. No, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman.
Thank you. Bills on second reading. Senate File 80, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 80, Public Health Orders, Local and Legislative Oversight.
There are no amendments. Senate File 80 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 87, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 87, Voyeurism Amendments.
Second, there are no amendments. Senate File 87 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. So we didn't close this one out on Senate File 80. There's 87. Senate File 87. Senator McEwen, did you have something for us?
Yes, Mr. President. I'd like to lay it back one day.
Okay, we haven't read the final script on this, so absent objection, we will lay back Senate File 87 one day. 80, excuse me. Whoa. Senate File 80 has been read. You'll have to handle that on third.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood the bill number. So we are back in gear now with Senate File 87. Senate File 87, there are no amendments. Senate File 87 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Senate File 130, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 130, Charter Schools.
There are no amendments. Senate File 130 having been read, please. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize to the body. I had requested an amendment to be brought on this bill and just wanted to have a little bit of time to work with the bringers of it. So would request that it be laid back one day so I could have that amendment prepared for second reading.
Absent objection, Senate File 130 is laid back one day. All right, that's a quick. Senator Landon,
Mr. President, may I have privilege of the floor?
please do.
Thank you. Mr. President, I know you had a meeting on Friday after many of us left. You were headed down to the House. And I just want to apologize for whatever happened to you. And if you need us to go down there and do some light work, I'll gather up some of these big old boys and go down there.
I would appreciate an escort next time I go down.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
all right. Well, thank you, Mr. President.
For a little housekeeping, if you'll mind, home, moving some things around in the garage and ATV and ball cap on, garage door down this high, walked into it at full speed. There you go. So you'll get to enjoy this look for the week. Thank you. And we're going to do some Photoshop on the pictures downstairs. Bills on third and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list?
Consent list.
One more time, please.
Mr. President, we do. I move third reading consent list. Following bills, Senate File 7, autonomous vehicles, Senate File 23, public meetings, executive session for security plans, Senate File 25, animal impound proceedings, bond and disposition, Senate File 35, State Budget Department, Senate File 47, clinical laboratory regulation, direct to consumer exception, Senate File 76, broadband development program amendments, Senate File 85, property tax reporting and exemption.
Would anyone like any of these bills removed from the consent list? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate File 25 should have some amendments forthcoming, so we'll go ahead and remove that, and hopefully we'll get those amendments to the body before we get to third reading. If not, we'll have to lay back. So
Thank you. And let's remove, we'll take care of that. Senator Nethercott, did you have one? Okay. One more call for any of the bills to be removed. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? Senate File 7, Senate File 23, Senate File 35, Senate File 47, Senate File 76, Senate File 85. Will the Chief Clerk call the roll?
On the consent list. Anderson.
Aye.
Baldwin. Beitman. Boner.
aye.
Bouchard. Case. Cooper. Driscoll. Ellis. French. Murphy. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings excused. James. Kinsky. Cole. Cost. Landon. McEwen. Nethercott. Pappas. Perkins. Rothfuss. Salazar. Schuler. Scott. Steinmetz. Wasserberger. President Dockstader. On the consent list, 29 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 7, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing, vote closed. Senate File 7, 29 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 23, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing, vote closed. Senate File 23, 29 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 35, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 35, 29 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 47, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 47, 29 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 76, are there any changes? Case aye to no. Bouchard, aye to no. Beitman, aye to no. James, aye to no. McEwen, aye to no. Salazar, aye to no. French, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 76, 22 aye, 7 no, 1 excused. Senate File 85, are there any changes? Case aye to no. Perkins aye to no. Steinmetz aye to no. Bouchard aye to no. At Nethercott, aye to no. Driscoll, aye to no. McEwen, aye to no. James, aye to no.
Boner, I don't know.
Boner, aye to no. Cooper, aye to no. French, aye to no. Dockstetter, aye to no. Rothfuss, aye to no. Landon, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 85, 15 aye, 14 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 7, Senate File 23, Senate File 35, Senate File 47, Senate File 76 have passed the Senate. Senate File 85, having failed to receive an affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 85 has failed to pass the Senate. Continuing with bills on third reading. Senate File 3, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 3, Automated Vehicle Identification System, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to motor vehicles.
There is an amendment. Would the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 3, third reading amendment number 1, page 3, line 2, delete.
Thank you, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 3. And first of all, fellow senators, we normally don't try to do much of substance on third reading. But in this case, you know, a lot of conversations about this bill. And I apologize for all the emails that you may have received that the Transportation Committee managed to conjure up for you. I've been listening, and I think the committee has, and I also think that the good senator who brought us this issue a couple of years ago, it was worked through the Transportation Committee and became a committee bill. it's important enough that that we thought we'd bring it out here for a great debate. That said, this amendment just simply strikes out the provision that would allow these traffic monitor cams to be used in construction zones at all. This takes it back to the original intent of the bill, which is the way it arrived to the Transportation Committee about a year ago, was just simply an issue up there on that far west mountain pass that I think we described hopefully well enough to give you a picture of what's going on. We think that's important enough for your consideration, but we've drawn it back and taken the construction zones out of there. And this bill now would focus, Mr. President, if this amendment passes, it would focus on that high mountain pass and give us an opportunity to see if we can keep that pass open for commercial trucks. And so, Mr. President, that is the amendment. And my co-sponsor of the amendment may want to say a few words about it as well. Thank you.
Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first, I'd like to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the Transportation Committee, its chair, its members, for helping, past and present, by the way, helping me with this bill. And I want to thank the body too. We had a good discussion, and I'm not going to belabor it today. As you recall, I had a second reading, this as a second reading amendment, and wanted to wait and talk to the body a little bit more. Over the weekend we did, and as the good senator from Ventura County said, we decided to make this change. I'll be honest, I'm not happy about that, but I also understand it made more people more comfortable. Not all, as I think you might hear. But I did want to thank you for the debate. I understand the concerns that you have, but I also hope you'll take into consideration and look favorably upon the bill and the amendment for what it is. It's trying to help us, a situation that we have in our area, in a restricted weight area that is very dangerous. And I hope you look favorably on it, favorably on the amendment, favorably on the bill. Thank you very much.
Just a minute, Senator Pappas. Got to get my screen back. Thank you for your patience, Senator Pappas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. On and against the amendment, I'm a little sad to see that this bill is going to be watered down by this. You know, as a member of your Transportation Committee in the last interim, there was a lot of discussion about safety, and YDOT really was looking forward to be able to slow down the folks in their construction zones. You know, folks have gotten hurt in construction zones. And this particular piece of legislation is not as all encompassing as what you've been seeing in your emails. And so it's sad to me that for political reasons, we're going to sacrifice safety just because we've gotten emails that are frankly from folks that don't understand the bill, that haven't read the bill probably. But when most of the email, the negative email that is coming in is based on rhetoric like we're going to balance the budget in the state because we're gonna fine every citizen in the state, that it's unconstitutional, that it's a violation of their privacy, that every license plate is going to be scanned and Big Brother will know license plates. Well, Big Brother already knows your license plate. I mean, there are just so many emails that I get that are really just not accurate. And for us to cave into that, to me, it's a travesty, because the intent of this bill is to get people in those construction zones to slow down. That's all. We're not going to put red light cams anywhere to find people. I think we made that point earlier on. And so I won't belabor it, but I guess I'm very saddened that this bill now is really a bill that initially, yes, was for one location. And we thought we made it better by including construction zones so that we could get folks to slow down in those zones for our YDOT folks and for our contractors that are working out there. But I think that we really ought to have construction zones in here. So again, on and against the amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment, Senator Furphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also against this amendment. We heard clearly from YDOT that the construction workers are being put at risk. And I think it's important that we do slow down in these construction zones. We already removed out of the bill school zones. So we understand that sometimes people were worried about getting a bill for going slightly too fast through the school zones, even though we're putting our children at risk. But really, these construction zones are very important to our state. So once again, I encourage you to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Chairman Anderson?
Mr. President, on and for the amendment. We started out with this bill with the Teton Pass problem, and everybody could see it was a good bill, so they piled on with a couple other ideas. Not that there's anything the matter with those other ideas, it's just not part of that original bill that was brought before the committee. And so I'm for taking those other two out and bringing them back with another bill another time, because I think they're worthy. 50 years ago, I was part of that construction crews that had speeding vehicles through them. And I know that that needs to be corrected. But for this right now, the problem we have is Teton Pass, and we want to get that taken care of. So on and for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the amendment. And I want to thank the sponsor of the amendment, because this really helped me. This changed me from a no to a yes on the bill if this amendment passes. And the reason I feel that way is, one, going back to what the former chairman just said, that was the original purpose of the bill. But the other one is this: over the years, I've voted. We've looked at some expansions on this, and I've been against those expansions, not because it's not a worthy way, but we've had some other ways to deal with some of those problems. For example, in construction zones, there's some other ways to deal with that issue. We put up cones, we do flaggers, we've got stoplights, we've got all those things. Now, are we going to guarantee against every bonehead that drives down the road? No, we're never going to fix that. And, I don't have any particular sympathy for them if they're cited for that. But there are some other protections. We've done a number of things over the year to help protect the workers in safety zones. We've doubled the fines. We've done a number of things to try and do that. We've got people slowing down. We're making people pull over a lane. You've got to slow down you got to slow down 20 miles an hour if you can't move over a lane. We've done a number of things to help with that over the years. This weight restricted thing is something that is another issue altogether. And quite frankly, what it is as you look at these overweight trucks, one, it's clear they know they're willfully violating the law. Two is there's not really another effective way to do that other than to stick a person there to watch all the time. Three is these overweight trucks tear up our highways and they cost us all money. We have to go out and repair the work done by these overweight trucks that however many trucks and thousands of cars can go over the same stretch of road and not do the damage that one overweight truck does. The other thing that happens with these overweight trucks is it's the overweight trucks are the ones that have the brake failures coming down the pass. And we spent they've got these runoff ramps that if they work, that's good for the overweight truck or the person who has the brake failure, but they're incredibly expensive. When you do trigger one, they're incredibly expensive to put back again because those runaway truck ramps are on the steep side of the slope and they're kind of, you would hope that they would work because otherwise it's a long way to the valley floor. But the other thing too is at the bottom of the pass, there's been a building completely wiped out by a truck with a brake failure. And that it's adjacent to the road, if I remember that some of the testimony we've had. And so when I look at that, I think that that's an appropriate use of this. I've always been against and will continue to be against automated speed traps, even in construction zones. But I see this as a differentiation, an effective tool to make sure two things. One, protect the road. Two, save taxpayers money. And I guess even three, to make sure that that this road can stay open, because the alternative of this, if this pass is closed, if some of these mountain roads are closed, it's going to create a significant hardship on lots of people in the valley because we've got a few bad apples, and I hope we could stop those. And with that, Mr. President, I appreciate the bringing of this amendment and intend to vote for this amendment. And if it passes, vote for the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
We're on the amendment. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, just real quickly, thank you for the good dialogue again today on this amendment. And I share the frustration of a couple of members of the Transportation Committee. My frustration rests with really where we are in our culture today, because there's a lot of misinformation and frankly, just not just misinformation, but some real nefarious kinds of emails have been flying around on this bill. And I'm sorry about that, because there was some good purpose for the bill. But I think this gets us back to where we can take a look, Mr. President. We can make that a safe mountain pass. We can take a look and see how that's gonna go and how it's gonna work. And I would vow to you, Mr. President, that we will continue to talk about how we can make those highways out there safer. And your Transportation Committee will continue that dialogue. We'll bring some things back in the future for consideration. But today, I encourage you to support the amendment and to support the bill. Thank you.
Ready for the question? Question on the amendment. Third reading, amendment number 1 to Senate File 3. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Amendment has passed. We're back on the bill. Question on the bill. Chief Clerk, take the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. Having read, are you, Senate File 3, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll. Thank you, Senator
Senate
Perkins.
File 3, Anderson. Aye. Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Aye. Beitman. No. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. No. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. Ellis. Aye. French. No. Murphy. Aye. Guru. Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. James? No. Kinsky? Aye. Kolb? No. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstetter? No. Driscoll, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 3, 19 aye, 11 no.
Senate File 3, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 3 has passed the Senate. Senate File 4, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 4, Airport District, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to aeronautics.
There is an amendment. Clerk, read in the amendment.
Senate File 4, third reading amendment number 1, page 7, line 19, after.
And our sponsor on that is Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. I do believe, and I want to make sure, senators, that you are looking at the corrected copy. Because
Hang on just a moment. I don't have a
so I
corrected
believe
copy
that
in front of me.
electronically, Mr. President, if you click on your screen, I believe that the amendment comes up that is not quite the finished product. So we
So
do
we
have
will need to have that read in, Senator.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
very much.
give us just a moment to stand ease for just a moment while we get that corrected copy out.
Thank you.
Thank you for that catch. Please.
Some friends in the Senate here have confirmed that it is online and it is the corrected copy. So I think if we could just start over and read in the corrected
Let's do
copy,
that.
I think we'd be ready to go, Mr. President.
Confirming the reading clerk has the corrected copy. So let's have the Senate stand at ease for just a moment. And we are clarifying that we have two different versions of this amendment. Thank you for your patience.
Other one, but you screwed this one up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stand at ease for 1 minute on this, please.
We could tell some stories from some kids. Good job on the floor today.
All right. Thank you for your patience. We now have the corrected copy, so we'll rewind just a little bit here, folks. And we are on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 4, corrected copy. Will the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 4, third reading amendment number 1, corrected copy. Page 7, line 19 after.
Senator Landon, do you want to take on the corrected copy?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move third reading amendment number 1, corrected copy to Senate File 4. Thank you for clarifying, Mr. President, getting us on track here. This, fellow senators, is an amendment that we got started on Friday and realized that we wanted to tighten it up a little bit. This has been a work in progress all the way through, and I want to thank my colleague from Sweetwater County. We worked together on some things that we think are going to make this bill even better. What this amendment does, there's 3 basic sections. You'll see that we have really worked on the language. Lines 1 through 5 is the authorization before a mill levy can take place. Lines 6 through 15, that's we have reduced the amount of years from 12 to 10 that that a general election be held on a levy or on the creation of the district. We've knocked that down to 10 years. We get down to paragraph C. That's where we ask that the district present for review and approval of the budget once a year through the proper authority. And that's one of the big changes in this amendment and a change in the bill. We just felt like it was important, Mr. President, if we're going to stand up one of these airport districts, it just makes sense that the authority which created the district in the first place or seated that board, that they have to come back to either the commission or the granting authorities for approval to even go for a mill levy. That gives that stamp of approval, by the way, is going to be good for the airport districts also, because it's going to give that kind of sanction and momentum to an airport district to even go for a mill levy. So that's the amendment. Again, I appreciate my co-sponsor on the amendment, and I know that he may want to speak to it. So thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Cole, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. President. This bill's been worked. I think it's gotten a lot closer to what I thought ought to be a connection to the voters. So we have a situation here where we're trying to have a way that the residents, the constituents, can get back to the people that are making these decisions that directly vote on these decisions. And I would say in some instances be the Board of County Commissioners, cities. It all depends on the mix within a certain district. And this is a mechanism for that to happen. I think it gets a lot closer to the people. And because of that, I'm supportive of this. And thank you for my chance to comment, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? We are on the amendment. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 4. Are you ready for the question? Oh, sorry, Charlie, you were hidden behind bars. Here we go. Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. President, and my question is how this amendment works with the other portions of the bill. Am I right in reading it that the amendment that a tax levy would have to be approved every 10 years by the voters, but I don't see in the remainder of the amendment that there's an approval by either the voters or by the county commissioners of the city or any other elected board at any interval other than that 10-year interval. Mr. President, my question is, am I missing something in all this? Because frankly, if this amendment doesn't provide more frequent reference to somebody who has to stand before the voters, I can't vote for it with the 10-year period that this is in here. I think that's too long.
Further comment on the amendment? We are on the amendment. Go back to you, Senator Landon.
Well, Mr. President, I hope I understand the question. I felt like it was maybe two-pronged. No, we do not have this district board standing for an election. That it still is an appointed board. Regarding that 10-year limit, I apologize if I didn't do a very good job during the process of this bill to help explain the fact that we have all sorts of different revenues that come to these airports. Everything from federal to all kinds of transportation commission grants that come from the federal level and the state level, and from private entities. And many times, contingent upon receiving those grants, you've got to have an airport plan that goes out about 8 or 10 years. In addition to that, it takes as many as 5 or 6 years for an airport to even secure a brand new fire truck because of all of the regulations that are placed on airports. Just some of the projects that we take for granted in regular construction just simply can't happen that quickly. So, originally we had it out to 12 years. We thought that was probably about the level of time that we might need for a mill levy to be in place in order to secure some funding. We backed that up to 10, and I think that what we run the danger of, to the senator from Natrona County, what you run the danger of is you could run a mill levy election and end up putting yourself in jeopardy of losing other funding, and you could end up actually backing up. So I think the 10-year mark is honestly, I feel comfortable with it, and I think that it puts our airports in a pretty decent position. So I hope that begins to answer the question, Mr. President. Thanks.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, I think to answer my tall colleague from Natrona County on line 27 through 29, it specifically says this: the airport district will come before those governing bodies, which it could be multiple counties and municipalities, and they shall present their annual budget and their 10-year budget, and it has to be approved by those governing bodies. So specific to the question, I hope that answers it. But yes, they're going to have to bring an annual budget and a 10-year proposed budget before those governing bodies for approval of that budget.
Double check, and I maybe should have noted Senator Land a second time, but I will, with objection, the chair will give him a third time if he needs to follow up. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I hear the reasons for the 10-year on going to the voters. And I can see why a shorter period might be a problem there. And that's fine. But I think in the interval, there ought to be approval of the mill levy by a group that is elected, because I am very concerned with special districts that get a mill levy and then just ignore the people, and our tax burden is going to get out of hand. I see the second paragraph or the long paragraph in the middle of the amendment that was just cited. And yes, it says about review when not approval of the budget, but I don't see any specific authority to review the mill levy and to make any difference to ability to change it or to say no to it. And Mr. President, I think that is essential for this to being a passable bill. So, Mr. Chairman, the amendment's fine, but it doesn't get the job done.
Let's, before we go back, and is there any more discussion on the amendment? On the amendment. Chairman Landon, what's your thoughts? Would you like a third?
Mr. President, thank you. I would just encourage you to support the amendment. I think it makes the bill better. So I would call for question on the amendment.
Question being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 4, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The amendment has passed. We are back on the bill. Ready for the question? On Senate File 4, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 4, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? No. Bouchard? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Murphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. James? No. Kinsky? No. Cole? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote. Hicks? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 4, 18 aye, 12 no.
Senate File 4, having been read, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 4 has passed the Senate. Let's move back up to Senate File 25. Senate File 25, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 25, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee. Animal impound proceedings, bond and disposition, an act relating to crimes and offenses.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is a third reading amendment. Was that read in, Mr. President?
Oh, excuse me. Reading clerk, read in the amendment, please.
Senate File 25, third reading amendment number 1, page 1 after 9, insert.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading amendment to Senate File 25 and ask for your favorable consideration. Good senators, this amendment is brought to you because of the passage really primarily of Senate File 26, which changed the law and repealed some laws, which all are consistent. And so we had to go back and make those appropriate corrections in Senate File 25 to reflect the passage of Senate File 26. And that's the purpose of the amendment. There are no new substantive or policy changes for this body to consider that haven't already been addressed in the previous amendments and discussion on both Senate files. And so with that, I'd stand for questions and ask for your favorable consideration.
We are on the amendment. Questions or discussion on the amendment? Questions or discussions on the amendment? Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 25. Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We are back on the bill. Ready for the question. Senate File 25, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 25, roll call. Anderson. Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Beitman. No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? Aye. James? No. Kinsky? Aye. Cole? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott?
Aye.
Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? No. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 25, 24 aye, 6 no.
Senate File 25, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 25 has passed the Senate. Senator Gru,
Privilege of the floor.
please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Up in the gallery over here from my home county is our assessor, and she's busily up there working on raising property values to bring us tax dollars down. So would you please give her a 2-hour ovation, Mel Schinkel?
She has quite a task in front of her. Okay, thank you, Senator. Let's, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Please.
Neither majority nor floor leader and I can't, neither one of us can hear very well, so sometimes we get confused. Before we start into that, Mr. President, what I'd like to do is if I could call for an extended privilege of the floor. The purpose of this is to provide we have a slide deck that we'd like to go through with just kind of for prefatory marks.
Please do. They check your desks. That slide presentation is there if you pull it out while the chairman goes over it.
And so we've also got it up here on the front screen as well. And so, Mr. President, members of the Senate, this is some background on the budget and where we've been. We went over this a little bit the other day as we go through the estimated general, what we were looking at as we left here last session. We thought we had a surplus of about $40.7 million in the general fund as but most of us we left here and the oncoming pandemic and all that was on there. We knew that before as the ink was drying on the signature of the budget bill, that it was not going to work very well. When the Craig met and the Craig had another meeting on May 26th of 2020, when the consensus revenue estimating group did their estimates of what we thought we were looking at by the end of the biennium, we believe that there was $877 million shortfall in the general fund, and that would also wipe out the statutory reserve, which is a 5% number of the general fund that is intended there to make sure you've got a little cushion in your checkbook that you don't bounce checks. So which is typically right now should be about $113 million. So when you take that, if you replace the statutory reserve, that shortfall is really right at $1 billion, right around $1 billion. Fast forward a little bit to October 26th, 2020. We came through, the governor had implemented his step 2 reductions. We had a summer that was better than anticipated with tourism, some other things. There was a few other things that mitigated, and some revenues to the state were a little bit higher than we thought they were. And after the governor implemented his step 2 reductions, the shortfall was down up to you see right there, about $112 million, again, with no statutory reserve. So that you add that 113, the total shortfall was really about right at about $225 million shortfall, even as late as October of 2020. The January Craig, which after we'd done that, we had we'd had budget hearings. The governor had also implemented or recommended a number of step 3 reductions that are implemented through the budget bill. When we did that, with the governor's recs, there was a surplus of $143.2 million, which fully funded and put back the statutory reserve, but also used a significant amount of the 1% severance tax stream to fund that. JAC, when it completed its work, basically did a few additional cuts in addition to what the governor had done, made some other relatively minor adjustments, which you'll see as we go through the budget bill, and also pulled back and restrained use of the 1% severance tax stream. And so when the JAC completed its work, there was about a $15.9 million surplus. And going forward, we think we've received, if you look at the out years, about a $25 million deficit in the general fund. But when you look in the grand scheme of things and how these things are made up on estimates, that's really manageable and we've reached relatively equilibrium for the next couple biennium with the projections that we have. Now, a few additional things have changed. The revenue pictures improved a little bit. A couple of other things have happened that actually this number now I think is really closer to $50 million surplus that we have now. And if we implement a number of the cuts in the budget, we would have probably close to right around, I think, sneaking up on about $100 million surplus if we implement the things that come through the budget. Now, as we say that, if you look at those timelines, that's what those projections are now. I mean, we budget based on projections. We all know that those projections can move up as easily as they can move down. And in fact, in this time right now, it seems to me they move down a lot easier than they ever move up. But with respect to that, moving on, we'll keep going. If we go to the next slide, just going back. So Michael, if you want to hit us to the next slide. So just going through and what the governor did, the government implemented a number of steps to try and ease this. He step 1 right off very, very quickly last year. He froze positions and any large general fund contracts that were over $100,000 and resulted in reversions or unspent money from the previous in reversions coming back from the last biennium that were $30 to $40 million higher than anticipated, and also reduced a significant amount of the spendings and which provides for savings from step 1. Then he implemented step 2 back in July of 2020 for budgets and ongoing expenditures, and required agencies to recommend a 10% general fund reduction. And so you look at the difference there, the difference without state major maintenance reductions and fund swaps, which we'll talk about in a minute, it reduced, he saved about $254.6 million, reduced that down, again, whittling away at that deficit. And if you allow some fund swaps, which again, we'll talk about in a minute, it amounted to a reduction of $335.1 million. Then step 3 is not implemented. He couldn't implement. He needs our help to implement that through the passage of the budget bill. And so we asked the agencies to identify another 10% general fund reduction. Again, that's another $110 million without major maintenance or reductions and fund swaps would be $62.7 million. So just let you know, and if we don't pass the budget bill, what we do is we leave the state exposed with a significant deficit. The major actions that we implement for the budget is without implementing the budget, there would be no access to the 1% severance tax, which is largely used to backfill or pay for major maintenance of, that's about $96.6 million. There is no backstop to the general fund in the LSRA without legislative action, and he'd also use up essentially all of the 5% statutory reserve, which again we've talked about as $113 million. Long story short, if we don't pass the budget, there's not enough money in the general fund to pay the expenses of the state by a significant amount. Continuing on, the governor's major recommendations as he came to your Joint Appropriations Committee with his budget On total average, he recommended the combination of steps 2 and 3 were about 15%, which would only be about 11% overall without state major maintenance, but it's 15%. As you go through the budget, you'll see it's not just across the board cuts. We went in and the governor went in particular, and it's most of them, sometimes they're across the board cuts in certain programs, but certain programs are cut more, some programs are eliminated. It was a very thoughtful and painful process to go through and make those recommendations. He also, as we came back to major maintenance, he recommended a 25% reduction in major maintenance, which is amounts to a $32.2 million reduction. He did that by moving the major maintenance multiplier, which is a number times the amount of square footage that's out there in state buildings, from 2% to 1.5%. He also shifted the remaining $96.6 million from the general fund to the SIPA, which is a fund swap that enabled some additional money to be available in the general fund. He also uses $128.8 million. He also recommended using $128.8 million from the 1% severance tax. That's what OPS stands for, is the 1% severance tax, to pay some of the shortfall in general fund expenditures that were in the budget, even as changed, or to directly support the 5% statutory reserve amount, which again, used to be that cash flow of the state was never much of a problem. That gets more exciting and more exciting as you talk to our state auditor in particular. When you look for that, trying to make sure that we have the cash on hand to pay the expenses of the state is becoming more of a challenge all the time. You get back, you see the next page that we have, you'll see the various agency reductions between the government and the JAC. You'll see those over the next couple pages, and you go down to the bottom and you'll see that when you see the total reductions of all funds and the governors and JAC, which took the second column, you see the total amount of cuts between the government's implementations and the recommendations and the fund swaps that have been made, that there's a $446 million cut to the general fund to try and bring us into balance. When you add all the total reductions, this is excluding school finance, but when you add all the reductions that are out there, including using SIPA money and OPSA money and some of the other fund monies, you still have total reductions. The total reductions in all those are over about $219 million. What your JAC did, as we go to the next slide, and looking at those, the major things that we did is that the difference between the JAC and what the governor recommended in his supplemental budget was we had another $1.5 million in budget reductions. We also added the strategic investments and projects account, also lovingly referred to as SIPA. We also did a net $21 million in lower recommended appropriations, mostly by stopping or removing some capital construction projects that people were advocating for. In addition, there were in the school foundation program account, there was $3.1 million in budget reductions, nominal budget reductions, considering it's a $1.9 billion budget, but there are some reductions in the school foundation program account. With that, continue on. If we go to page 8, the major change, again, continuing with the major changes from the government's recommendation, the 1% severance tax remains an op, so we're not spending that. We're trying to reserve that and put that into savings. If you go back and look, and a very interesting fact is, if you go back and look at how we've accumulated money, particularly in the permanent trust fund and in the common school permanent land fund, which are about $8 billion and $5 billion respectively, very little of that's ever come from rollovers or just increases in value. The vast majority of that, so probably 90% of the increase in those values have come from savings. In particular, some of that is from constitutionally, but a lot of it has just been because over the years we've tried to resist, in many instances, spending the opposite account and continue to contribute it to savings. If we save it and invest it and use the income off of it, we can use that income forever. If we spend it now, We're, you know, to some degree, we're eating that, we're eating and using the seed corn. The other major changes, remove the LSRA backstop for employer health insurance contributions, which saved 21.33 million. We did that because that account's healthy. We don't think it'll need to be tapped. And so we removed that backstop. One thing that we also did that was different from the governor's recommendation is the JAC came back and kept the National Guard Youth Challenge Program. That is about, if I remember right, a little over $3 million in general fund, but about $18 million or so in federal funds. But I can't remember the exact number, but it's not even close to a one-to-one swap. It's mostly paid for with federal funds. So we put back the cut of the National Guard Youth Challenge Program. We also transferred $19.6 million from SIPA to balance the school capital construction account, which are mostly, right now there's a deficit in the school capital construction account for existing ongoing projects. And so it brings that back to basically so that that count is no longer overdrawn. Continuing on to the next page, we also reduced school foundation program funding, various diversions, Department of Education school foundation program by 15%. Some of that we put back in, quite frankly, the general fund, but most of that, there's a few minor reductions where school foundation program money was being used somewhere in some places, but trying to reserve that so it pays for, it goes into the state aid and pays for that more directly. We also moved SIPA funds to the University of Wyoming and Community College for new capital construction requests. That'll be in a separate bill. The capital construction bill. We reduced the governor's local distributions cut by 1/2. As you see, that's another bill. That bill's already gone through here. They cut that by 1/2. The governor recommended 10.5 million. The JAC put it at 5, but then as we came back and passed that, that's now back at the governor's recommendation of a little over 10 million. As that left this body. The next page, you see Senate appropriation. This is the state appropriated positions. These are positions in state government, the number of employees that we have. And you'll see this gives you a history of where the employment of state jobs has gone over the last, basically the last decade. And so you'll see that we've continued to decrease. And so we've got from the governor's recommendation, and then you see what we've got a little bit of a difference there of a few spots, but you see we continue to go down. A lot of the positions taken were vacant, but this year some of those positions have people in them. And some of those, there's been a number of layoffs at the state level for things that were funded. So it's not just vacant positions. Decisions we're making are also cutting existing jobs. And some of those people don't have their jobs anymore. But we're continuing to reduce that. I think with that, if we go to the next page, the other major appropriations bills that are out there. So not every major budget item is in the bill that we're about ready to talk about. Out there, Senate File 64, we have local government distributions. That, as we said, that one's already gone through this body. We have on the other side coming this direction is House Bill 121, state funded capital construction, and it appropriates various amounts of money. As that's gone through, that has changed since it left JAC, and we'll examine what number of those changes are as it comes over here, and we'll do our work on it too. We also coming this direction is House Bill 61, which is a school finance and recalibration, which reduces the school foundation program to some degree. We'll see it. We're hoping that gets over here so that we have a vehicle to talk about and to discuss and debate the appropriations for our schools. And with that, coming back to the final page on this introductory comment, we have when we get through with this, we see what these available balances are that are left. But if the budget bill passes as it's recommended, you'll see what's left in there. So we have the general fund. We have so many left in SIPA. We would have approximately little over 1.1 billion in the LSRA left. And we also we'd also have the 1% savings tax, 128.8 million that I'm hoping at some point we can deposit those into savings accounts and put those to work for the future. And Our outlook, next biennium, we see that if we implement the changes that are come through the budget bill, our next biennium, we don't have a $27 million shortfall, plus the statutory reserve amount is there. At 27 million at that level and with the projections is basically equilibrium. We've pretty much got this general fund if we pass the budget bill and make these changes, and a lot of the cuts are included going forward, that will really be long-term to appear to be balanced in the general fund. That's been the first time in quite a few years that we can say that. We go to the school foundation program, approximately a $250 million, 50 million a year plus investment guarantees in future years. We know long-term that without changes, we have a significant deficit going forward in the school foundation program. Depending on what it is, and of course it'll change as we go in time. It's about 300 million in the next, not this biennium, but the next biennium, and close to, about 600 million if I'm in the next biennium. The biennium after that, about 900 billion. And then the school capital construction account, approximately 50 million a year plus investment guarantees. School capital construction is still we have not solved. We used to do that through the cold bonus amounts. We haven't had cold bonuses in quite some time now. And so we have continued to struggle to find a way to fund school capital construction, whether it's new schools, whether it's replacement schools, or even major maintenance for existing schools. So with that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, those are our introductory remarks, and just kind of some ideas and backgrounds of things we've wrestled with, and kind of from a very high level of kind of how the governor approached this and what your JAC did to try and move this and advance the ball down the field going forward. So,
Mr. Chairman, before we move into committee of the whole, would you deem it appropriate to take any questions, or you just want to jump into the work?
Well, we'll do whatever you prefer, Mr. President. We're going to go through the budget. We're going to explain it, and we'll have opportunity to answer whatever questions anybody has as we go.
Let's do this. If there's anything real pressing while we have him standing up in kind of a open, go ahead. Senator Anderson and then Senator Scott.
Mr. President, on page 10, I'm a little confused with those numbers. It says full-time, looks like it's 7471. Then there's a 215, and then the part-time at 257, and then some equation gives us 6999. Can you explain what those numbers all mean? I understand the 257 is part-time, but there's three other numbers there that don't quite add up. Thank you.
Let's collect them before we go back to the chairman. Senator Scott, you had a question?
Yes. Yes, Mr. President. And let me preface the question by saying that I think we really have to look at the school funding in coordination with this, because Mr. President, we have, and we will deal with school deficits out of the general fund if we have to. So Mr. Chairman, I think you have to put that into the general mix here and see whether we're out of the woods or not. My concern is that with if we do nothing in the school finance, I'm told that we will run the legislative reserve account, our rainy day fund, down to the point where the schools have to live with the revenue that's dedicated to education 4 years out, and that's a 30% cut under the current estimates. My question is that true? And I've been explaining it to people that, yes, it's 4 years out, but there's enough uncertainty in our revenue so that maybe it's 3 years out, maybe it's 5 years out. But there's an interplay between what we do in the general fund and what we do in the schools. And I want some guidance as to what the results of this are in terms of what the impact on our reserve accounts are going to be when you take a full look at the schools and see what happens if we do nothing this time.
Any more before we go back to the chairman? All right, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, one question I have regarding the structure of the cuts, and I'm curious as we go through the committee of the whole review of the budget, maybe highlighting this point where it appears, but the idea of the cuts today that are liabilities in the future, as opposed to cuts today that are actually cuts in the future as well. And I'm specifically contemplating on page 4, the 25% reduction in major maintenance as an example of that, from 2% to 1.5%. And we know in school facilities that the most cost-effective major maintenance multiplier is more like 2.5% to optimize the cost efficiency of the fleet of schools in the state, so that we're effectively repairing instead of rebuilding. And I would ask if, as these cuts were considered, if any thought was given to the long-term cost of some of these cuts. And I know that we see that as well. And for example, some of the programs that were cut from corrections, we know lead to higher recidivism rates when the cut is realized, and then the recidivism rate going up leads to more imprisoned persons, which leads to greater costs down the road. Was any analysis done by the governor's office to contemplate the true cost of cuts in any of these circumstances, Mr. President?
Okay, we've racked up 3 questions. Ready to go back to Vice President Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll take the first question from my colleague.
Oh, take the easy one.
Okay, Senator Hicks. Senator Hicks, would you take the easy question?
Mr. President, some of us are quicker than some of the slower members of the appropriations. So to answer my colleague from the Corona County, when you look at those last 2 numbers over there, the difference is the Challenge Academy that we have in Guernsey for those additional 40 positions. The governor had cut those out. It was the JAC's position that we thought there was enough value in that program. They now offer high school diplomas for these more challenging kids, and their success rate is going up, and it's about half to keep a student in the Challenge Academy than what we currently spend on the school foundation program. And the chairman of appropriations alluded to that earlier. At 75% federal money, 25% state. So it's a good investment. So we put that money back in there. That's about 40 some positions over there at that challenge, Matt. So that's the difference between why you see that little bump there between the governor's rec and the JAC and the additional positions back in there.
Mr. Chairman, would you take the 2 hard questions now?
We'll work on that. So if you want to go back and just to follow up on the appropriated positions, if you go to that chart. So starting at the top number, 7,471 is the total number of all employees, regardless of their classification. The 215 are the AWEC, which are at-will employee contracts. And so that's what the 215 is. The 257 are part-time, and then the bottom number, the 699.99 are the full-time ones that that's the full-time positions. As you can see, the majority of the cuts are, when you look at those, I mean, they're mostly full-time positions. And as the good vice president just said, the majority of the differences between what the governor's recommendation was and what the House bill does is the restoration of that program and the full-time positions that were not cut related to the National Guard Youth Challenge Program. And there's a few others you go through, you'll see that there's a few other places where the Joint Appropriations Committee took some additional positions that were vacant, some other places. But that's a few here and a few there, but the majority of those were the numbers that came out of the Youth Challenge Program and the restoration of that program. Going to the other numbers, I think, going back to the other questions, 2 things I think I would are, as you go through the budget. In fact, if you actually get the budget books, and there's 3 volumes that are this size, And then that's why it's this small, the three that are this, and that's because it's a supplemental budget. It's not a full budget. If you had these books, they would take up a banker's box and a little bit more in a full budget. But as you go down through, it's very obvious as we made these changes, the departments were very aware of the effect that some of these things are going to have. And so, yes, I think there was quite a bit of concern about what happens when we make some of these cuts. And over the long term, they may, it's true that in the number of these cases, they may cost the state more. A classic example is the elimination of the wraparound program. But the other side of that coin is if you don't have the money, how do you do that? The wraparound program was reluctantly omitted because it's not required. Maybe it's not required and we had to continue to cut the budget. Our directions are, and from our caucus, you've been in our caucus meetings, you've talked with each other, you know that it's very unlikely we're increasing taxes. If that's not the case, then I think it's our responsibility to continue to remove that. And the budget and the governor took that on very seriously. As we make these adjustments, the cuts that we're making don't help anyone. And in fact, they hurt many. But what are you supposed to do if you don't have the money? And where do you cut? Well, when we look at a $2.3 billion budget and close to $2 billion of it is in the Department of Health, guess where you have to cut? You have to cut where the money is. You'll see that everybody took a hit. But when you have 2/3 to 3/4 of your general fund is expended in one department, and those are and that's the department that pays for those programs for the aged, the elderly, the developmental disabled, those who, the Medicaid programs, all those things. That's, you have to make and balance those cuts the best places that you can when there is not revenue. And how many of you think the revenue picture for the state of Wyoming is going to get better in the long term right now? Now, there's federal money coming. You could drain the LSRA, but until or unless these things are balanced and taken on, it's not that we went in and cut there gleefully. You cut the best places you can, making the best decisions that you can to hurt as few people as you can. And so as we go through, you'll find it's a very sobering experience to talk about this budget. With respect to the education, I don't disagree with my tall colleague from Natrona County at all, but there's some other things that are on the line here. Again, as I go back to the opening remarks, when you talk about it, it's one of those things, if it's forced into the budget and we don't if we force the education discussion, education finance into the budget, and we don't come away with a budget, I can tell you that there's about, if you go to the differences, if you go to page 3 of the presentation and see the high and low numbers on a couple of those, that's really the cost of, and one of the big deals, I can tell you mostly, if you kind of get most of it out of step 2, if we don't pass a budget bill. So if we get bogged down in education discussions and we don't get a budget bill because we forced education discussion through the budget, what's at risk is about, quite frankly, out of the $447 million in cuts that we have to the general fund, you would find about 200 million, maybe a little bit more, that would not be able to be implemented. In addition, the governor would be left to be levying money like crazy because the budget as it's passed and the general fund as it's there without legislative action, the governor and the state cannot cover the bills that are out there, even with the reductions that have been imposed. They have to have legislative action to move some of this stuff around, or the budget just won't work for the biennium. So that's one of those things that you really do have about a good 200 or $200+ million of cuts that are at risk if we do not pass this budget and as we try and at least balance the general fund side. Those are policy decisions. We get to talk about those and debate those, but that is that's the fact of the matter going forward. So I think it's very important we have the discussion about about school finance education, is my hope that we get a vehicle through the recalibration bill or other, so we can have that conversation, we can have that discussion. But we'll make those decisions when the time comes. But that would be my initial, those are my initial reactions to those questions and comments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Landon and then Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really appreciate the chairman of appropriations, vice president, and all the work that they've been doing. I just had a couple of spots that I had a question about. And one is regarding the Office of the Public Defender. That one sort of stood out to me, even though I know that we're looking at 10% or greater across the board. You know, the judiciary branch in general is a very difficult place to back up because, you know, it's all people. There really isn't much room in those budgets. I don't know all the differences in the Office of the Public Defender versus, you know, the courts, et cetera, but I have heard that that's a pretty hot spot. And I just wonder if there's been conversation regarding this cut and what it might do for justice. The second question is, do these reductions in employees, do they reflect the layoffs that are occurring in the colleges and the university as we speak? I don't believe they do, but I think that's something to kind of remember, is that there are already reductions in employees going on. And Mr. President, just a final thought. I'm going to try as we go along to represent a couple of areas that I represent for you. I'm on the State Building Commission as your representative, and I also, for a long time, have represented you and tried to take care of the Select Committee on School Facilities. And my only caution there, Mr. President, is that long-term outlook. We've learned in the state of Wyoming through experience from the 1980s and the 1990s, we quit investing in these buildings. And boy, did we inherit a mess. That's why we've had to spend the money that we've spent to catch these things up. And so that's my caution, and we can visit it about those as we go along. But public defender, colleges and university. Thank you.
Let's go to Senator Scott and then back to the Vice President. And some of these questions will be picked up during the budget presentation itself. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, they all very fine about whether we ought to put education stuff in the budget. That's not what the question was. The question was, given how the revenues have changed, given the budget reductions that have met here, if we still have the shortfall that was projected and as the education drained the rainy day fund, are we still going to run out of money there in 4 years? Or is what you've done here change that enough so that if we can't get anything through on that, and I am concerned about what's going on that score across the Capitol, are we going to wind up with an impossible situation where education is going to need general fund and support out of the reserves, and it isn't going to be there? And that's what I'm trying to get at. I've heard that 4 years out, the budget reserve account is drained. This budget does things to the budget reserve account one way and another. We save some other monies. Are we still in the problem with education, or are they fine? What's the consequences here? Because, Mr. President, that does influence what we do in this budget.
Let's do this. Let's go to the Vice President. We'll come back to the Chairman of the committee to respond, and then Majority Floor Leader, please be thinking about some direction for us. Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, Mr. President, and specific What we'd like to do now, I know there was a question from my colleague from Natrona County about the public defenders, but Mr. President, if we could hold those specific questions to specific agencies as we get to them. I do think the discussion that the colleague from Albany County and Natrona County has raised is on the cost of major maintenance. So when we go through the budget, some of these items are one-time and sometimes they're biennialized, and you have to really go through each agency's budget and each one of those reductions. And we'll try to highlight some of those as we go through there. I think we recognize the issues of the past as far as associated with major maintenance in particular. This was a pretty big one because we know that liability, and I believe it's about $185 million a year just to do the maintenance on all the state buildings. It's certainly not one that we're probably going to want to kick down the road for very long. It'll be high priority, I think, for the Appropriations Committee is if we do see a continued improvement in our revenue, to probably move that percentage back up instead of one. We reduced it 0.5%. Probably move that back to 2%. And if the budget and the revenues are so inclined and come in, we'll look at something else along those lines. So this was really to try to get us at that balanced budget for this year, knowing full well this is an area that you don't want to mess around with in a long time to incur that revenue. To address my tall colleague and my old benchmate over there from Natrona County on education, this budget does nothing to solve the future liabilities associated with the school foundation program. It really doesn't address those, in my opinion. This is just the general fund side of the equation. So it won't change the trajectory of the almost $900 billion surplus when we get out to biennials. Deficits. It just doesn't change that. So it's not going to reduce that liability one iota. So this is strictly the general fund side of the budget. I hope that answers the question.
Mr. Chairman, you want to come back to you or are we done?
I'm hoping we get into the bill because we're going to have these discussions again as we go through the bill, Mr. President. So
Thought it would be good for us to kind of have a general overview. So with that being said, we've got a couple of different options. Mr. Floor Leader, where do you want to take us? Are you ready? Who'd we forget? Senator Cooper?
I don't want to hold things up here very long, but I just want to make an announcement up behind us here. From Basin is our superintendent of schools, Dave Kirby, and his wife Connie. I'd like to welcome him. I'm tickled to death to have him here.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Appreciate you coming from Basin to visit. Mr. Floor Leader, what's your direction?
Mr. President, I move the Senate resolve itself in the committee of a whole to consider only the budget bill, Senate File 0001.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. Senator Case, bring your experience to the front.
Knock it off.
Committee of the whole will come to order. The first file for our consideration is Senate File number 1. The reading clerk will please read the file.
Senate File 1, General Government Appropriations, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee.
You've heard the reading of the file. What is your pleasure, Senator Perkins? Shall we go to section 1?
I'm waiting for you to go green.
Oh, yeah, I have to give you a light. I've been zooming too long. I'm sorry.
And turn me off.
please.
With pleasure. Senator Perkins, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee of the whole rise and report to do so with a recommendation that Senate File 1 do pass. For an explanation of the bill, I'll call on various members of the Appropriations Committee as we go through. Mr. Chairman, what each of you have, a couple of things that you may want to have out in front of you is the actual budget bill is this document here. which for the first time since I've been in the legislature, at least that I can remember, this has been available for 3 months. I don't think it's ever been available for 3 months before the session. The other document that we work through, sometimes affectionately called, which we call the budget summary, is, or the summary review, is a document that you may want to look at. It helps summarize the budget bill and the actions that we took. And we're willing and able and ready to take on any questions. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the first section for our consideration is section 1, agency 1, the office of the governor. Mr. Chairman, as you look at the office of the governor, you'll see as you look at the summary of the budget review or the summary review, sometimes called the SR as our acronym, you'll see that you have the governor's total recommended changes in the first 4 columns. On the left side of the columns, you'll see the JAC changes, and then you'll see how those are reflected then in the draft bill. And so with that, you'll see a couple things. One, the governor actually proposed a reduction of 3 full-time employees. And in doing that, he's also got a couple of part-time employees that he put in there so there's a net reduction of 1 total, but you'll see that 3 of those, that there's actually reduction of 3 full-time employees were what was recommended in his reduction. The couple of things that we have that would refer you to in the summary review is on the note 2 in the summary review, the JAC reduced $30,000 of the general fund for 200 series support services and moved this to the Wyoming Department of Education for Talking Books program and added a footnote 4 to biannualize the reduction. The Talking Books program we put back is about a $70,000 program where people who are visually impaired can rent talking books. Originally it was on the chopping block. This is one of the ways we put some of that money back into the Talking Books program. Also, a particular note is note number 4. The JAC's action related to the governor's recommendation of $50,000 for the Wyoming Coal Marketing Program, which we'll also talk about when we get to section 300K. There's a goal. You'll see that the governor in a couple different places, he just knocked $50,000 out of that. There's money in there to continue to do this. This knocks a little bit out. Still very important going forward. He thinks that he has this down to a size. He still has enough money in there to do what needs to be done. Also in note 5, you'll find the JAC denied the governor's recommendation of moving money around. S13 is, I believe, the SIPA or the Strategic Projects Investment Account, and added $250,000 in general fund of coal litigation and outreach coordination. Again, trying to make sure that there's a couple things about the current lawsuit against the state, some on the western seaboard or on the Pacific seaboard about trying to get coal through to coal terminals there. There's litigation there with our sister state to the north to undertake that and make sure that we've got what we need there to get that done. But as you go through there, the governor was very, he went through and did a number of things. He made some modest reductions also to the FNRPA account, the Federal Natural Resources Policy account, reduced that, but that account still has a healthy balance in it. So that modest reduction, one-time reduction, there's more than enough money in there to continue to work do the work of the FNRPA account that FNRPA is entitled to do. The governor had fewer positions and has fewer positions and didn't fill all the positions that were there when he came into office. And some of those aren't filled, and so those positions were offered up and taken. So with that, Mr. Chairman, those are the highlights of the governor's office and his recommended changes. And with that, I'll stand for questions on office of the governor.
Thank you. Any questions on section 001? Any questions? Seeing no questions, section 001 is closed. Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going to section 2, Secretary of the State. Secretary of State did. You also look down there. The governor's recommendation was that there were 2 changes. Really, there were no changes to personnel in Secretary of State. And simply, the JAC adopted the governor's recommendations and really didn't do much else there.
Any questions on section 002? Any questions? Seeing none, section 002 is closed. Senator Perkins.
Thank you. Next section is section 3, the state auditor. Again, same thing, the governor and the auditor work together. I should say the secretary. The secretary and the governor's office worked on the ones in the last section. Again, the state auditor and the governor again worked on these. Most of the savings that you find in the state auditors are with respect to, they went back and negotiated a pretty good reduction in an IT contract, a large IT contract that supports the offices in there. And so they were able to reduce that. They also gave up a couple positions that may impact their ability to do some of the work, but not overall. May impact some timeliness and responses, but overall, the auditor believed that she could get by with those reductions and made those reductions. Other than that, there's nothing of particular note that the JAC did with respect to the state auditor.
Any questions about section 003, state auditor? Any questions? Seeing none, section 003 is closed. Senator Perkins.
Thank you. The next one is section 4, the state treasurer. Again, the state treasurer came back. A couple of notes that I think are particular. Most of you see is what most of the governor's recommendations were adopted, but I would refer you to note 2 in the summary review. The JAC reduced an additional $7,500 for in-state and out-of-state travel and added footnotes to analyze that reduction. One of the things you'll find consistently out here is reductions to in-state and out-of-state travel. And that's in large part because we found out that these virtual meetings can be relatively effective and we don't need as much for the travel to doing that. So that's something that's offered up throughout the budget. Also would refer you to note 3, that JAC denied the governor's recommendation and added back $227,779 for 900 series services and added footnote number 6 to sustain the reduction in the next biennium. Just thought that they cut a little deep there and wanted to put some of that back to make sure that they had the contract services. The treasurer's office has been through a number of changes and they've had a number of processes. They're trying to catch the back room and the financial accounting up with the front room and the trading, since we've internalized a lot of that trading now. Want to make sure that they've got the resources necessary to get that done. And would also I refer to note 6 on the summary review, where the JAC adopted the governor's recommendation of some additional 600 series to reduce some grant series and aids and payment from the state treasurer's office, but denied an additional reduction of $34,000 for the Native American motor vehicle exemption, and added footnote 7 to sustain the JAC's recommended level of funding for the program the next biennium. Long story short, what that did is those mostly have to do with some exemptions on Native American license plates. And as I talked with the nations and the tribes and thought better of it and put a significant part of that back for the Native American exemptions. So with that, those are the questions that concludes my comments on State Treasurer's Office.
Okay, any questions on section 004? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on veterans exemptions. How do we get $2 million savings in that?
Senator Perkins.
Thank you. So as you know, the answer is that we cut some of the benefits to veterans. The way that those veterans, that mostly has to do with license plates exemptions on veterans. The state has appropriated money. What happens is the county doesn't collect that money, and then typically we reimburse the county. What we did is we took the available money that was left in the original appropriation, made our best estimates of what it does for those exemptions to use the money that's been allocated without allocating additional money. And then there's other bills that are passing through that will actually reduce the exemption a little bit. I think the numbers are our average exemption will reduce it about $6 a month for a veteran. It's about a 30% or so reduction in the veterans exemption. Another example that if you go through, there is nobody that wasn't affected by these budget cuts.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. Any further questions? Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate that. Again, on the veterans exemption, is the property tax exemption included in that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hutchins. Let's get Senator James's question next, and then we'll go back to you, Senator Perkins. Go ahead, Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You say that nobody's was not affected by this. I'm just curious how many executive salaries were cut in this whole situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator James. I think we're back to you, Senator Perkins.
If you get back to what it is the fact of the matter is that they have furlough. There are all kinds of state employees that have taken furloughs and taking reductions in pay. So again, there's nobody that's not affected by that. Now, you haven't seen your pay cut, but we have reduced expenditures. So you'll find that we've reduced expenses. You'll find even in the legislature, you'll find that there's reductions in travel, there's reductions in the number of things. Every branch of government, almost everybody has taken some effect in this. So have the salaries been cut permanently? No. But there has been reductions throughout state government.
Senator Perkins, there was a question from Senator Hutchins about the property tax exemption.
And yes, I believe that these are the reduction you see in the 2 million, those are the property tax exemptions. Like I said, most of the largest exemption, most of the money seems to come out of the license plates. But yes, I believe that's the money that's deposited in there for all veterans exemptions. And it's quite small amounts, but it affects a lot of veterans.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. Further questions on section 004? Further questions? Further questions? Not hearing any. Section 004 is closed. The next section for our consideration, section 006, 005. Senator Perkins, which one are we on? 6, right? Who's got that? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, section 6, A&I, one of our bigger agencies. We go through here on their budget. The net of this is the governor's budget reduced A&I's budget by $6.33 million and removed two full-time employees. The JAC further went in and amended the A&I budget, reduced another 2 full-time employees for another reduction of $120,000. Mr. Chairman, those are the actions. If there's any questions, I'd stand for any questions. If not, I'd move to close.
Okay, any questions on section 006? Any questions? Not seeing any questions. Section 006 is closed. Next section is section 007, Wyoming Military Department. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 7, Military Department is found on page 5 of your summary sheet and 13 of the budget bill. As you can see, footnote 3 of your summary sheet corresponds with page 13, line 8, and footnotes 3 and 14 on the top of page 15. JAC denied the governor's recommendation of $1.2 million in school foundation program funds and denied $3.6 million in federal funds and 51 full-time equivalent positions for the Cowboy Challenge Academy, which would have eliminated the program. JAC authorized the program to continue and reduce the appropriation from the school foundation program funds by $279,006 and federal funds by $662,341, which amounts to a 10% reduction in FY22. We added footnote 3 on page 14 and 15 of your budget bill to biennialize the reductions to 20% for the next biennia. The Wyoming WCCA is a program that is funded 25% by school foundation program funds and 75% federal funds. The military department believes the program can work with the 20% reduction. There are currently 41 positions filled, 51 positions authorized. JAC next denied governor's letter number 1, which appropriated $594,000 in school foundation program funds and $1.5 million in federal funds to extend the program until closure because it was no longer needed. Footnote 6 of your summary sheet corresponds with footnote 4 on page 15 of your budget bill. This was a 7-5 vote where the House Appropriations position prevailed. JAC adopted the governor's reduction of $265,151 general fund and added back $150,000 for the general fund for the Veterans Museum at the airport in Casper and provides for the museum to be operated by the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. This addition is biennialized to $300,000 in the next budget. In order to achieve this appropriation, $150,000 was reduced from the agency 40 for the insurance department. Unless there are further questions, that concludes the explanation of section 7.
Any questions on section 7? Any questions? Senator Nethercott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's a lot of emotions wrapped up in the Cowboy Challenge Academy, and a lot of effort has gone into ensuring that's a successful program. Just a couple questions about that, because when the executive branch wants to cut a program that's so popular and appeals to so many, that's certainly something to take note of, because it's not politically savvy potentially to do that. And so to override that recommendation is certainly notable to me. And I recognize that it receives significant federal funds, but so many of our programs receive significant federal funds, and we'll need to cut those regardless of how much federal funds we receive. So some questions I have about that. One is, how many of those students going through that program are Wyoming high school students to begin with, or would be, as opposed to out of state? Because I've heard some differing statistics associated with that there's a large number of out of state students, and I appreciate them, and I'm glad that they're able to take advantage of that opportunity to steer them in the right direction. But when it comes to a budget question, are we really receiving the right return on investment for our young people in the state with this program?
Senators, let's get another question. Let's get Senator Bonner, and then we'll go to Senator Steinmetz. Go ahead, Senator Bonner.
Mr. Chair, I have an answer to that question, actually.
Well,
if
wonderful.
it's okay. Looking at the, Cowboy Challenge Academy, I think the JC made the logical decision that was based on facts. And it's because we've had this discussion before in years prior. 2017 was the last time we discussed the Cowboy Challenge Academy. The dollars and cents do make quite a bit of sense, if that makes sense. If you look at it in terms of a question of, if you have a Wyoming student that transfers from a Wyoming high school into the Cowboy Challenge Academy, does the state save money on a per student basis or not? The answer is absolutely yes. If you divide the number of school foundation program dollars divided by the number of Wyoming kids in there, it's about $10,000 per student. And so that's ignoring the federal funds and ignoring the non-resident kids who are in the program as well. And so if you're looking to balance, you have that question as to, does the 3-to-1 very generous federal fund match make up for the fact that there's also non-Wyoming kids in the program? The answer is absolutely yes. I think we have different, different opinions about, political savviness. Maybe it would be political savvy of the 60 or so field positions that are reduced in the budget. Maybe it's makes sense to concentrate them in one tiny little town in Platte County. Maybe that makes political sense. I'm not sure, but I don't think that's really the reasoning behind the decision at any rate. I think once again, this well over $2 million we're spending to support this program makes a lot of sense on Wyoming dollars per Wyoming student. It's the most efficient use of school foundation program dollars in the entire state. And I think the merits of the program speak for itself. In addition to the avoided costs we have of these kids are often in a time of flux, I guess, in their life, and they could go either way. They can, in this program, gets them back on track so that they're contributing to our tax base instead of being a burden upon it. So when you actually crunch the numbers, it does make quite a bit of sense. Especially when you look at, I understand the challenges we have with our school foundation program, but this is a rounding error. The $2 million out of a $3 billion budget is frankly a rounding error. So lots of good reasons to keep the Cowboy Challenge Academy. They do good work for the state. And I strongly support the program, not just because it's in my district, but because it makes a lot of sense from a fiscal perspective as well.
Thank you, Senator. That was very sensible. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So that's the direct cost, and there's a direct cost savings to the school foundation program. Let's talk about the indirect cost that it saves the people of the state of Wyoming. These kids are in trouble, and they usually have one option. They either go to the Challenge Academy or they drop out. But if they do stay in the public school systems, they tend to take a lot of time and effort. There are disciplinary problems. They're disruptive. So you lose that opportunity for those other kids that are in those classrooms or and influenced by these individuals. So you have that opportunity cost that you lose on the learning side of it. And the other opportunity cost that we save is where do a number of these young men and women end up? Well, they end up someplace stuck in the criminal section. There's a high rate of potential that these are going to end up in one of our institutions or in some other form of social services. So, this is kind of the last ditch effort. And what we've seen is it works. A number of these kids are graduating with high school diplomas that otherwise wouldn't have. So we can calculate the direct costs, and we know there's a savings there, but there's an indirect cost there that's pretty significant across the board. So I think all those discussions came into play when we looked at this. It wasn't an easy decision. Anytime you have a Republican governor that makes a recommendation for a significant budget cut, I do consider $1 million pretty significant, at least in my own personal finances, but maybe I've been here too long. But I do think it's important, Mr. Chairman, but there's a direct savings and there's an indirect savings. And then there's the human aspects of giving these kids one more chance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Senator Nethercott, following up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Cowboy Challenge Academy is remarkable, and I applaud its efforts. We did great work, and the Wyoming Military Department has done great work. Certainly providing opportunities from young people to avoid wayward outcomes is really great. How many Wyoming students are in the program? That was my question.
Thank you, Senator Nethercott. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just happen to have some of those numbers. So the first class began in January 2006. Since then, 1,267 graduates through class 42, December of 2020, have graduated. 73.2% are Wyoming residents. 797 high school equivalency certificates were earned since inception. The historical graduation rate is 66%. And I have class 38 through 42. Class 38, FY 18, there were 46 total cadets. 24 were Wyoming cadets for 52.17% Wyoming cadets. Class 39, FY 18, total cadets 97, 59 were Wyoming cadets, 60.82% Wyoming cadets. Class 40, 96 total cadets, 57 Wyoming total cadets, 59.38% Wyoming cadets. Class 41, FY 19, 80 cadets, 56 Wyoming cadets, 70% Wyoming cadets. Class, and the rest of the class was canceled due to COVID-19. Class 42, 93 cadets, 56 Wyoming cadets, 60.22% Wyoming cadets. I would also mention that it is a condition of the federal funds that we take cadets from other states that do not have this program operating. And so that is a condition of the federal funding, which is 75%. Also, if we were to drop this program, we would be in a significant gap area because other Nebraska and Colorado do not have this program. I'm not sure where the closest state is. I could probably find that information out to you. So we would be disenfranchising those number of cadets that are from Wyoming to find a close place to receive instruction through a program like this. So I hope that answers your questions. If I can get you any more information, I'd be glad to. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Any other questions on 007? Any other questions? Seeing none, section 007 is closed. The next section for our consideration is section 008, Office of the Public Defender. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agency 8, Office of the Public Defender, can be found on page 6 of your summary sheet and 16 of your budget bill. The public defender reduced the general fund budget by $2,491,917 for a total reduction of 10%. Footnote number 1 of the summary sheet corresponds with footnote 1 in the budget bill. With the passage of the 2020 session laws, the Office of the Guardian ad litem was created as a new agency in Section 89 and removed from the Public Defender's Office. There was one FTE and 2 part-time employees that were reduced in this section.
Thank you. Questions regarding section 008? Any questions regarding 008? Seeing none, the next section for our consideration is section 009. Senator Hicks. Or it's wiped out of the bill. Senator Perkins. Senator Kinski, Senator Perkins, Senator Hicks, Senator Steinman, let's go. Senator Perkins.
So what you have, you look at 9, the Wyoming Pipeline Authority. There was last year, we combined the Wyoming Pipeline Authority and the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority into the Wyoming Power Authority. And so you just see this is just zeroing out as we move those over to the Wyoming Power Authority, I think is the right name. We'll get to that section later. You'll see a couple of these where that's all we're doing is just, it's zeroed out because we're moving it into another, because of actions we took last year and created another department that now does that job plus more. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. So any questions on 009? Seeing no questions, 009 is closed and gone forever. Section 0010, Department of Agriculture. Senator Hicks?
Did you miss section 008?
No, I thought we did it.
All right,
Maybe you weren't there that day.
I'm just checking to make sure you understand.
Well, I could make.
Mr. Chairman, we're pretty fast. I just didn't want to make sure that something got by you.
We didn't miss it, but you did.
I think we got that well and good, and now we're on section 010, Department of Agriculture. Is that you, Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, that's me.
Go ahead.
All right, so members of the committee, so when we go through this resulted in the governor's reduction of a total of 11.8% to the general fund budget, which was $3.55 million. The JAC did go back in and restore part of that funding, $129,000 for one operator for large scales to provide weights measures for large trucks. And then also we restored $116,000 for the pesticide registration program. Those are monies that are received through the department and then they're redistributed out back to the local weed and pest districts. Total reduction of employees was the governor reduced 4 and we restored 1 for this large scale capacity truck to do the weights. With that, Mr. Chairman, includes my explanation of section 010, Department of Agriculture. Stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee of a whole beg leave to rise and sit again.
Would you mind if we close that section out? Senator,
I'm sorry.
is there any questions on section 010? Any questions on section 010? Section 010 is closed.
Start again.
Back to you, Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee of a whole beg leave to rise and sit again.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
That's why. So when I was doing it before, I would go find 5 or 6 bills.
I've got them.
Just not gonna go. That's what, of course, you never know for sure. Just to keep the pipeline moving.
Majority Floor Leader Driscoll.
Mr. President, I move we stand recessed till 2 p.m.
Announcements? Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, your favorite committee, Minerals, will meet today about 15 minutes after this noon recess, about 12:30 then, in Capital Extension Room 4 and online. We will hear Senate File 39, Digital Identity, Senate File 116, Wyoming Business Council Directors Reduction, Senate File 148, Requirements Relating to Depositors Amendments, Senate File 149, Oil and Gas Royalty and Tax Rates, Senate File 152, Connection of Utility Services. We probably won't be able to hear all those bills, and they will carry over to Win. Thank you.
Thank you. Further announcements? Chairman Case?
Yes, Mr. President, your committee number 3, revenue, will meet tomorrow at the Capital Extension. I think it's West 6. And we will hear Senate File 92, County Hospital out of county operations.
Chairman Landon?
Mr. President, your Transportation Committee will meet upon adjournment today to take up Senate File 73, tolling authority for I-80. And that will take place in W2 down on the causeway, just past the tolling booth. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, further announcements. Further announcements. Just a reminder as we move back to lunch, let the good folks there serve you. And you might want to check your favorite news sources. There's something important related to masks as of the 16th of March. All right. With that, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate stand recess until 2 p.m. Thank you.